Welcome to the Formulize tutorial video about linked select boxes. We just looked at regular select boxes, which can be shown to the user as a drop-down list or as a list box. They look like this. If we just open up this form, here's a drop-down box. It gives us a choice of animals. That could be done as a list box, so instead of dropping down it would just have these options visible on screen and you could pick them. So there's various ways that select boxes can behave, but in terms of the options that they have, if we look at how that element is configured, what type of animal, it's a drop-down box. If we configure it, then the options are, well, they're just typed in as those four things. So if we consider this situation for this imaginary application we have, if it was a real conservation area tracking the activity of these various animals, well, really they would probably want to have a sort of an animal list somewhere, a master list of all the animals, and they might have other information that they're tracking in there just about the animals in general rather than the activity that they notice the animals doing. So this form is meant to record the activities, but another form might in fact be used to track, just keep a list of all the animals in general. And if we had such a form, then instead of typing in the animal names here, we could link to that form. And that's what this first option here is for. Use the values that people have entered in this form element, and then you can choose an element, and basically all the values that people have entered into that element, those will be used as the options. So we only have one form available to us right now. We need to create another one, an animal list, and then we can then link to the names of the animals that have been recorded in that master list. So to walk through this, first let's go back to the wildlife activity form and back up to the monitoring application. So here we are. There's our form that we were just looking at. Let's create a new one. We'll call it the animal list, and we'll save that. And now we can set the permissions on this form. Just briefly, there's more detail on permissions in the separate video about permissions, but we'll just set these here for the supervisors. And they can view all entries, they can do most things. There we go. So we can save that. And this form is just about ready to go. We'll add a text box. Call it animal name. And that's all we need to do actually. So now we have a very simple form with the name of the animals. Now we'll add in some other elements to this shortly, but for now let's just go back up to our application. We've now got our two forms, the animal list and the wildlife activity form. So if we view the animal list form, then here it is. It's only got the one field, the animal name. That's fine. That's all we need now for dealing with the linked select box situation. So let's put in our animal names here. And beaver and wild pig and Atlantic puffin. So there's our animals here. We're all done. I'm going to put in those four. So here they are, and we can add in more as we add in other elements to this form, such as how many there might be in the park or general notes about the animals. Those extra fields would be visible, or would at least be available under change columns. And so we can have sort of a little database about the animals that we keep track of here, just separate from anything else. Now what that lets us do is when we go to the wildlife activity form, instead of what animal is it as a drop down, as something like that, let's just delete that element. Now we're going to lose all data that people have recorded in here, but that's that'll be a little odd the first time we go back into the form, but we can deal with that. We're just obviously still setting things up here. So are you sure you want to delete the element? Sure, let's do that, and let's recreate that as a different type of select box, a linked one. So what type of animal was it that you saw? And then we can say options, use the values that users have typed into the animal name element in the other form. So basically a list of all the available animal names. Let's save that. And now if we go back up to the activity form and then back to the application, we can view the activity form and we can edit these entries, and it's going to tell us, it's going to give us the same choices, although you'll notice that they are actually in different order, because when options are linked from another form, it's going to put them all in alphabetical order rather than the order that you typed them in. So we can choose an animal here, and it works all the same. So no difference from the user point of view, but there is a difference from how the data is working behind the scenes and what you can do with it. And I'll show some examples of that in a moment. So if we include that new column in what's visible, change columns, then there we go. This one has recorded the animal. The other ones, because this is a new field, nothing is visible. So that looks like a more complicated way of doing what we did before, but there are going to be some benefits to that. Obviously, in the long run, this form can fill up with new information. New animals can be added. For example, if I go back to the animal list and I add one, let's say we add the how about the woodpecker. I know there's many types, but I can't think of one in particular offhand, so let's just add woodpecker. And imagine that we had added, we would have more information here in our little mini database of animals. So we have woodpecker, and now when we go look at another entry or we create a new entry, woodpecker shows up as one of our available options. So this is one of the key benefits of doing a linked select box, is you don't have to actually edit that element all the time. You can have two or more different forms in the system that are all interacting with each other, and as users change information in one form, then other forms are going to respond. There are even some more advanced things you can do, such as if we just add in briefly, let's add in a text box for the number of animals in the park, estimated number in the park. Estimated number in the park. Now this is a text box. We'll make it maybe size 5, numbers only, and we'll save that. This will give us an additional option if we're now interacting with this form. There it is, estimated number of these animals in the park. So we'll just change to include that column so we can see it. Hasn't been specified for any of these things. But let's say black-footed ferrets, there are maybe 100, and for beavers there are maybe 25, and for wild pigs maybe there's a whole herd of wild pigs, maybe 300, and we'll save that. So with that done, then it lets us, rather, let's go back to our administration side. If we go back to the list of all the forms and we configure our wildlife activity form, we can now we can be more specific about what values, what options in that other form we want to bring in. So here we are in the wildlife activity form settings, where we say we're pulling in the animal names as the list, and that's certainly what we've seen here. Just as a reminder, here's the question. It's got all those animals that are coming from the animal list form now. But since we added in some other information into that form, we can start to get more specific about what we want to show people. So if the options are linked, there are several additional things that we can do. And one of them is we can say filter the options that we're bringing in based on these properties. So we could say only where the estimated number in the park is, say, greater than 50. Perhaps we use different forms for different kinds of animals, or who knows why people might, there's different reasons that you might want to filter based on different information. But let's just save that for now. Now what that's going to do, if we just skip back to our animal list, we said, well, these are the animals, these are the estimated number in the park, so this should only give us right now a choice of 2 animals, because there's only 2 that we know of that have more than 50. So there's the condition that we set. We've saved that, and if we now look at the form and we reload, we sort of go to make a new entry perhaps, then what are our choices? Well, black-footed ferret or wild pig. So when you link options from another form, you start to have a lot more control over how the options behave, and what information the user is going to see in what particular situation. I mean, you can even go so far as to use the properties of this particular form in the choices that you're seeing. So if, for example, maybe let's add another. Let's go back up to the form, back up to the application. Let's add another option to the animal list. Let's add, say, radio buttons, and let's sort of mirror that time of day option. What time of day is this animal usually seen? So if we say morning, midday, evening, night, then there's our options. So we can go back to say the black-footed ferret is usually seen at midday. So we're adding more and more information to our little database here. It's a new column, so let's just add it to our list. There we go. And maybe the beaver is usually seen in the morning, and so on. So you can set that kind of information. You can, we can have whatever information we want in the form, obviously. But since we've done this, we can now start to have an interesting interaction, even more interesting interaction between the two forms. So here's the form, and it has this choice also of what time of day you saw this activity happen. So with that in mind, we can go back up to the form, back up to the application, let's change some more things about how that link is being done. On the Options tab, here we are. So we have this condition. Let's maybe get rid of that condition. Click the X to turn it off. Let's instead say now we need to know, now this is where the data handles become important. As it says, you can use curly bracket data handle to refer to the value of an element in the current entry. So imagine that the animals we want to bring in are only the animals that are going to match the time of day we've picked. We saw an animal in the evening, so our choice of animals is going to be only the animals that were seen in the evening. So the way we would just have to know the data handle there, so we can refer to elements in this form itself. So let's actually just stop this for a moment. The time of day. Now, right now, because we just started at a very basic level, we didn't specify the data handles, but we can do that now. So just to make it a little more obvious and easy as we're working with this information later. So let's call time of day instead of the number 2. By default, all the data handles are numbers. And so once we've done that, see, and it tells us now that the internal name for that, or the data handle name, is time of day. So now when we're doing our link to the other options, we're going to pull in the animal names from the other form. But what time of day is this animal usually seen? We can say we only want to bring in animals from the other form where the time of day that it's usually seen matches the time of day that we've picked in this entry. So let's save that, and let's rather go here back to the wildlife activity form, and let's just take a look at what time of day we said. There we go. So if we say go to this entry where we'd said midday, now our choices are going to be black-footed ferret, because at the moment black-footed ferret is the only animal that's available at midday. Now if we said morning, we could save that, and our choices are going to be different now based on beaver. So that's the way that you can link up information between forms. You can have a full list and various information in that list. You can link then another form to that list, and you can have the behavior of the linking change depending on what the other information is. You can also base it just on group ownership as well. If you look at the tutorial video on regular select boxes, it does talk about the scoping that you can do based on the groups, and if in this case all these entries are made by the same person or all made by supervisors, but yes, all of those are made by supervisors, but if in a case where you had multiple groups creating information, maybe you want to limit the link based on group memberships. So there's lots of different things that you can do here. There's also well, some final things to be aware of. You can limit how many times each option can be picked. If to turn off this condition, normally you wouldn't create them and then delete them right away. But if we just reload this page by pressing enter in the URL, that'll cause it to reload. There. Now we see this, so we can delete it. So let's just get rid of the condition that's there, and that will give us more options so we can show things like this. So say each option can only be chosen once. When you have linked options, you can do restrictions. Let's save that. And what it means is, let's go to the top here. So beaver is chosen. These are the other ones that are available. You'll notice the woodpecker is not in the list. And that's because woodpecker has been chosen here. If we go to Simon's entry, woodpecker and beaver are not available because they've already been chosen. So you can limit options so they can only be chosen once. You can also do that per user or per group. So maybe it's okay for woodpeckers to be chosen more than one time, but only if it's by a different user. So there's a few different ways that can work. You can show linked values as clickable items in the list. If we save that and go back to our list, the animal names are now clickable, and they will take us to the entry for the animal. Here's the beaver. There's 25 in the park, normally seen in the morning. So that's sometimes you may wish the form to be an entry point into other data, and that's one way that you can do that. You can give people a list of things, and they click on that, they'll go right down to the details. But let's turn that off for now. You can also have different values displayed when exporting, or also just displayed in the list. So right now, when displaying the element in the list, it's going to use the linked field, namely the animal name. Our particular data that we're working with right now doesn't make a whole lot of sense to change that, but sometimes you might have the animal name and then maybe a code number or something like that to identify that entry. And maybe you'd rather have the code number displayed in the list or something else. Let's just pick estimated number in the park, for example. So let's just save that. And what happens now is we see the choice of animal just like before, but when we leave and look at the form itself, what's showing up here is now a number, namely the estimated number of beavers in the park was 25. So you can mix and match what's shown on the form versus what's shown on the list, although we'll revert that to the animal name. And you can also do that for exporting. If you wanted, normally what's exported is the value that's displayed in the list, but if you wanted to override that to any particular other value, you certainly could. So there's many options for how people interact with linked values, and they're really quite powerful for control. That's where you start to have a real application, because different information that's in one form versus another form versus another form, that information can start to interact with each other and can start to have an effect on the user's behavior in one part of the system or another. So I hope that's useful, not too confusing, and well, you can try it out yourself, and you can review this to look at particular details later on.